Assalamu alaikum. In the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful. Just wanted to share a few thoughts. First and foremost, want to wish Allah's blessings on all of those of us who have attempted the fast. Unity fast is day 3. Finish line is in sight, especially for those of us on the East Coast. Thank Allah for the opportunity to work on self and work on our discipline and get better fit for service in the cause of Allah with His Apostle, the Honorable Minister Louis FARRAKHAN. Just got done, by the grace of Allah, out here with the paper, greatest newspaper on the face of the planet Earth. Final call, there it is. And I noticed a little something today, and not just today, but it just kind of clicked for me today, that the people's reaction to this title, Defending FARRAKHAN, you can almost see in their faces, why does he need defending? Of course, the answer's in the paper, which is why we're out here trying to get it to them, to our people, and to whoever wants to read it. But there's a different question that I think needs to be considered, and that is not so much why does FARRAKHAN need to be defended, but why do we need to defend him? See, there's a difference in the meaning in that question. Why do we need to defend FARRAKHAN? Well, all I can do is share my take on it, my view, my understanding, whatever that may be. But I'd like to put things in terms of observable phenomena, correlations, if you will, that help me understand it. And I figure if it helps me understand it, it might help others to understand it as well. But if you think about chemistry and our atmosphere, the scientists and the chemists tell us that our atmosphere that we breathe every day on our planet is composed of 78% nitrogen, 21% oxygen, and 1% argon and other inert or minute gases. Now, if the essential element that we need for our survival is oxygen, which it is, then why is there so little of it in the atmosphere compared to the nitrogen that's in the atmosphere, which we don't necessarily need to live in terms of breathing? Well, just looking at it from a chemical standpoint, oxygen, pure oxygen, is extremely volatile, flammable, and some I've heard liken it to fire itself in its pure form. I don't say I agree with that 100%, but I think it's worthy of note that it is so flammable, it is so volatile in its pure state, that the slightest little spark can ignite it. And I, being a former U.S. military, having training with oxygen and the properties of it, especially at sea, transporting liquid oxygen, or having to wear what they call oxygen breathing apparatus for fighting fires, they tell you when you take off your oxygen breathing apparatus, take the mask off, wait at least a minute or two, maybe 5 minutes before you light up a cigarette if you smoke. Why? Because the oxygen is still hovering around your head, your face, and if you light that match around that around that oxygen, it too will ignite and your head will, resemble a freshly struck match. And so this is the nature of the oxygen, so it's extremely flammable. So if the atmosphere were pure oxygen, it would be so caustic, it would be so unstable or so volatile that the slightest spark would set it off, and we would be breathing fire, maybe for as long as it takes for us to die from it. So the observing this, the nitrogen, the 78% nitrogen in the atmosphere, serves to dilute the oxygen so it's not so concentrated where it becomes caustic or combustible enough for us to breathe it. So if there was ever an instance, and I want you to listen closely to this, if there was ever an incident or an instance where the nitrogen was removed from the atmosphere, then there would be nothing between us and the fire that would eventually and inevitably ignite due to the sparks that may be present. So to keep us from being burned by the oxygen, Allah puts nitrogen in the atmosphere to dilute it to the point where we can breathe it and get enough that we need to survive, to live, so that our organs can function, which all depend on oxygen. So what does that have to do with defending Farrakhan and why we need to defend Farrakhan? If you remember what I said, if that nitrogen were ever removed from the atmosphere, the result would be fire. Well, if we consider the atmosphere, the political atmosphere, the social atmosphere, the geopolitical atmosphere, it's very volatile, but there's something keeping it from igniting, right? Now, we in the Nation of Islam know, as we have been taught by the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan and the Honorable Elijah Muhammad both, that the closer the enemy gets to making his move on the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, the closer Allah gets to removing Minister Farrakhan from our midst and bringing his judgment down. Okay? The closer the enemy gets to making his move, right? The closer they get to getting and putting their hands on Minister Farrakhan, the closer Allah gets to removing him from the atmosphere, from the environment. So, why do we need to defend him? We need to defend him because we need as much time as we can get, by Allah's permission, having the minister among us. So that if we rise up in defense of him, that keeps them at bay, keeps the enemy at bay at least a little bit longer. Not because the minister needs it, but because we need it. We need as much time to prepare ourselves and to get ready. And if we fight to defend his honor, his name, his character, his integrity with truth, and the people see this, then that forces the enemy to delay for a time, maybe a short time, their move. They have to think again. So we have to defend him because, for our sake, not so much for his sake, because Allah got the minister. But who are we? We say we are his helpers in the cause of Allah. And if we don't help him, then the enemy comes and make it easy for the enemy to come and lay their hands on him, then we're cutting short our own chances and our own time to get ourselves together to be found worthy of God's mercy and promise. So I just wanted to say that we defend Farrakhan not just for our sakes in the nation, but for the sake of our people who need time, have had plenty of time, but yet need time. As much time as Allah sees fit to give us. But I believe personally that it has a lot to do with our willingness to stand up and to defend the man on whom the survival really of our people depends in terms of how we respond to him and the message that God put in his mouth. So that's it, really. I just wanted to share that, just some observations while I was out here with the paper, me and another brother in the city, and looking at the people's face and kind of trying to gauge the climate and trying to understand what is really going on, you know, the bigger picture, as we say, or as the minister says. That's what came to mind. You know, yes, we are defending Farrakhan, not so much because he needs it, but because we need it, and the benefits that might come from it if it pleases Allah, in terms of buying ourselves more time, buying our people more time. Because when God takes this man from among us, remember what we said about if the nitrogen were ever removed from the atmosphere, the result would be fire. If Farrakhan is ever removed from our atmosphere, trust and believe the result will be fire. So just something to think about. Whatever feedback, criticisms, critiques, whatever you want to share, please feel free. Let's dialogue and let's see what we can do to keep up the fight. We are fighting for Islam, and we will surely win with our Savior Allah, the Universal King, and under the leadership and guidance of his apostle and Messiah in our midst, and in the name of his living and exalted Christ, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. Assalamu alaikum.